The Questions Log, Week 3.
Everything that exists has a specific nature. Each entity exists as something in particular and has characteristics that are part of what it is. A is A. And no matter what reality he calls home, Luthor is Luthor.
This is 52 Pickup.
Hello, and welcome to 52 Pickup, a podcast about the greatest comic you have never heard of. I am Gita Jackson, and I'm, as always, joined by...
I'm professional DC Comics expert Alex Jaffe, and, I'd almost pay to knock you out.
We have such a good issue to talk about this week. I'm so excited.
Here we are, 52, number 3.
Yes. This is where I think, as a reader, I really sort of perked up, I was like, okay, I could read this every week.
Yeah, it's very easy for a series to have a very promising first issue, and then the wheels kind of start to fall off around here, or it has momentum that keeps picking up. Issue 3 is kind of when you see a book has legs.
Yeah.
There are a lot of recent books, I won't name them particularly, that had just absolutely stellar first issues. And then just a couple months in, you realize there's not much there beyond the initial pitch.
Yeah, it's weirdly a lot like television. I used to be the kind of person that would watch every pilot when pilots would come out in the fall. And I would note that sometimes the better a pilot was, the worse the overall series would be.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
It's clear they made this show to sell a pilot, and then they were kind of like Wile E. Coyote catching the Roadrunner. What?
Yeah, very much so. Lost was really a miracle when you think about it. I don't know if you've watched this, Alex Jaffe, but I'm obsessed with this YouTuber, Mikey's Mike. And he is just this like super gay Australian 20-something, like Gen Zer. And he has a master's degree in engineering. So he does these really, really long recaps of complicated television shows that include like a physical prop that he's built of some kind. And he did one for Lost.
Great.
Fantastic. It was so good. I can't wait for his second season.
A lot of bendy time travel lines.
Oh my God. So he has a concept for the recap that he's says it'll only become clear after you've seen it in action. And it doesn't really make sense to me yet, but he's devised the system of colored lines to indicate who's related to who. It's really fantastic stuff. It's the kind of stuff I would do if I was a YouTuber, I think, but I'm not like a performative video person. I don't have an acting background, which I think is true of many, many people on YouTube.
The kind of stuff Vic Sage would throw up on a cork board.
Yes, very, very, very much so. And it's and why isn't there a supervillain in DC that is a gay Australian YouTuber? I think that he would do a great job.
I've seen many writers attempt to do current social media villain, but the problem is you have to not be 50. Mm-hmm. And
my idea, and I'm not going to reveal it on air because because it's a good idea.
You need to keep some secrets to yourself.
Exactly.
Let's not even put that in the podcast. We don't have ideas. We've never had ideas in our life.
We are but gentle observers that observe and make commentary on those things.
I am like unto Uatu the Watcher. I may observe, but I may not interfere.
For me, it's more like Venture Brothers. Ignore me!
Ignore me! Someone left a baby!
I would go around shouting that when I was a teenager. I was a very fun person.
I just rewatched the entire series. I wouldn't recommend watching it now if you've never seen it before. But if you have seen it before, a rewatch is great.
Great. Well, then I fall into the latter categories.
Yes.
let me get on that shit.
Anyway,
back to comic books.
I was just rereading Neil Gaiman's Sandman, as I do basically every year. And it was very amusing to me that at the end of the first volume, he has this whole issue where Morpheus stands in basically for Neil himself, where he's like, great, I did my plot idea and I have an ongoing series to write now. And I have no idea what to do with myself. And that's when Death shows up and says, well, now what you do is your fucking job.
Yeah.
And the series kind of takes off from there.
Yeah.
So what we have here in this writer's room of Mark Waid and Greg Rucka and Grant Morrison and Jeff Johns is 4 writers who love to play the long game. Grant Morrison famously on their Batman epic. Jeff Johns, who took 10 years to tell this Green Lantern space opera of many colors. Greg Rucka, who had Gotham Central, Wonder Woman, played out the entire arc of Wonder Woman as a diplomat from start to end. Mark Waid, who has the patience to have literally read the entire back catalog of DC Comics and is writing the slowest story in this volume, the Elongated Man story. So these are 4 writers who know not to shoot their wad in issue 1.
Mm-hmm. You can see why they were influenced by what was happening in television at this time, right?
Yeah.
So brief history of television, and it's not, without missing a lot of the details, but it starts off as a medium essentially designed for advertisements, right? So you have episodes that are built around advertisement breaks. And therefore, in order to make it easy for people to just pick up and watch anything, long-running continuities are not really the jam. This starts to change around The Sopranos, specifically. But there's other series around that time. Star Trek DS9 started having shorter episode arcs. Homicide: Life on the Street is another really famous show, famous for changing how television plot arcs were written at the time. And then you begin to see television writers using the nature of the medium, which is that at the time you would get like 25, 26 episode seasons, and you could really very slowly build a strong continuity that, of course, did lock people out, right, from watching the show, but created a stronger storytelling benefit. Like the impact of seeing something that took several seasons to set up on like Buffy the Vampire Slayer, the viewership, like they'd never seen anything like that before, and
right.
It impacted them really strongly. And this really came to a head around the time that 52 was being written, and some of the, this was called like peak TV. So you would have something like, you'd have 24, which the idea is every episode is 24 episodes in a season. So every episode is an hour of a day. And then you'd also have Lost, which is built around a long-running mystery with a strong mystery box opening. The initial pitch was that it would be like Monster of the Weeky, but they definitely threw that out like almost immediately.
Like 52. They had an agenda they were given, and they threw that out for something more interesting.
Yes, they adjusted on the fly because they realized the story they wanted to tell was not the same as the one that they pitched, which is like something that just happens when you're a creative person. But you can see like how these 4 writers that are always been interested in playing the long game, they would take a look at what is successfully happening in television at that moment and be like, let's try it. Let's see if we can do this. And of course, you need like more issues in order to seed it,
It seems like you're trying to tell me that writers are important to television, but that doesn't sound right to me.
No, I mean, don't you think some of their demands are unreasonable? I'm joking, of course, I'm joking. It seems like, it turns out writers are the basis for literally almost everything that happens.
Especially when it means flagrantly ignoring bad ideas.
Yes.
That's kind of the writer's most important job, and why 52 works where so many other similar series don't.
Yeah, no, they did not try to please anyone but themselves in writing this. And it makes it very good, but it's also like frustrating to be in a creative organization, and that's the case for some other people that aren't you.
I want to start by talking about the cover. We don't talk enough about the covers here on 52 Pickup. This pretty phenomenal art we get every week from J.G. Jones and colorist Alex Sinclair. What I love about these is that they look like Time magazine covers from the DC universe.
Yes.
Like they're not comic book covers, they're magazine covers, which is interesting because at the time, and really to this day, among hardcore weekday warrior comic book readers, there's this tendency to read comic books as if they were newspapers, that you don't really care so much about the story as you do just being current with what's going on, so you know what's happening. And 52 really taps into that impulse of just keying into this universe by making it real in a way that other comics kind of fail to live up to. And here we see this sort of man of the year two-tone portrait of Lex Luthor, half in red and half in blue, one with a green eye, which is going to be a reference to a clue we'll see later in the story. Also, I think what J.G. Jones is going for here is an allusion to Superman Red and Superman Blue.
Yeah, I think
that
so
idea
too.
of there being two Supermen, but here we have two Luthors.
Yeah, one of them has the classic power armor around a collar around his shoulder, and the other one is wearing a suit, which is also like in the popular imagination the two versions of Lex Luthor that we've seen outside of comic book media.
Exactly. The sort of businessman Lex Luthor kind of evolving organically out of the 70s movie Lex Luthor played by Gene Hackman and built up by John Byrne in Man of Steel, and that kind of war suit mad scientist Lex Luthor being straight from Jerry Siegel. But yeah, those are the two conflicting sides of the character we're going to see Luthor himself try to reconcile in this issue.
And this cover does a lot of good work in priming you for a really good Lex Luthor revisionism in terms of how they're going to position his character for the rest of this series.
And, you know, we are still seeing a little bit of that element I spoke about earlier where they were considering maybe we hide some kind of secret or Easter egg in each cover. And in this case, it's the green eye of one side of Luthor that's going to play into a story we'll discuss in just a few moments. Let's go to day one.
Actually, pause. Do we want to talk talent?
Yes, let's talk talent. Our usual writers are on the case here. We got Joe Bennett on pencils, Rui Jose on inks, and the same editors. Our new talent this week is letterer Pat Brosseau. Pat Brosseau is a prolific DC and Dark Horse letterer around this time, who's, I think, best known for doing a lot of like logo design for cover blurbs. I'm going to put something in the chat here, which shows off kind of a collage that he made of some of the cool stuff he did for DC. Take a look at that.
Oh, I see it. This is incredibly cool stuff. It is really dynamic text design with a lot of directional manipulation of the text. A good example of this in this corner is the Who is Wonder Dog, with the Wonder Dog on it's like arched, but it's also at a little bit of an angle, so your eye follows the text extremely well, even though there's not a lot of stylization there. This is all what I would consider like classic comic book text design.
Yeah, evocative of real, like, kind of Dick Sprangy stuff from the like 40s and 50s, but updated for the 2000s.
Like, this is what letterers say their jobs is. They're graphic designers, right? And this really proves that very well. All of these just could be a logo, but they are also meant to be read. And so they are particularly designed so that they're easy to read immediately. And also evocative of the story they're going to tell. The Outsiders Know More with a question mark and an exclamation point is another really great one. I'd put that on a t-shirt.
A lot of great t-shirts here. So that's our new talent this week. We're going to see a lot of people cycling in and out. We'll continue to highlight them as they show up.
All right. But on to the actual issue, finally. Do you want to set it up for us?
All right. So what we have here is a little bit of a fake out to the ending of Infinite Crisis, where some Gotham cops, 3 weeks after the crisis here, find the dead body of Lex Luthor in a dirty alley in Gotham City. The curious thing about this is we saw back in the end of Infinite Crisis that Alexander Luthor Jr., who we talked about a couple episodes ago, was impersonating Luthor at the time to run the secret society of supervillains, and then he got attacked by the Joker because he failed to invite Joker to it. And that's kind of his end. But he was horribly mauled in that, and Luthor's face here looks fine, so something is up, and things are not necessarily as they seem. The other thing going on here is that originally, as this scene was scripted, Greg Rucka called for 2 cops from Gotham Central to be in this scene. This was supposed to be one of my favorites, Josie Mack, who did make it. Josie Mack is a character from Gotham Central who is a metahuman on the GCPD. She has the ability to find lost objects, which is very useful as a cop.
Mm-hmm.
And the other one was supposed to be Marcus Driver, but Joe Bennett, our artist, accidentally drew him as Crispus Allen, who should be dead right now. He very infamously died in Gotham Central. So they recolored him at the last minute and renamed him Detective Jang, who is a character we see here in Never Again.
Yeah, I was curious about this because he looks so much like Crispus Allen.
Yeah.
But he did famously die. Like, that is like a really essential part of that series.
Yeah, just didn't get the note.
Yeah, whoopsie.
All right, I don't know what happened to fake Crispus. Maybe Detective Jang is still out there. Maybe he quit being a cop like all good Gotham cops do.
Yeah, ACAB, even the cops on Gotham Central.
Absolutely, especially.
Yeah, honestly, especially that.
Yeah. If they were good cops, there wouldn't have to be a Batman.
Right? That's like the whole thesis of Batman.
Batman literally said ACAB in 1939.
I am the knight, ACAB.
Which takes us over the skies of Kahndaq. We're seeing Power Girl chasing Terraman, who's a cowboy space villain from the 70s. Terraman's deal is that he was born in the Old West, abducted by aliens, and then came back in the modern age to be like an Old West outlaw, except he had a flying horse and laser gun.
You know, if it wasn't for what happens to him at the end of this issue, I would say he needs to be in every single comic. Holy shit.
There have been a couple reboots since then. Terraman can come back.
Terraman's fine. It reminds me so much of that Blizzard game with the star in it. You know, building more pylons. You don't know about video games.
Oh, StarCraft.
StarCraft. There you go. See, my description was useful.
Yes.
There you go.
You said one of the magic words. The other one would have been craft.
Zerg Rush or build pylons. Yes. You know, so in StarCraft, it's like weird. And I think if Blizzard examined this in the year of our Lord 2023, they would perhaps make different choices. But the like Terran faction is just like Civil War, Confederacy, Lost Causer stuff. And it's really uncomfortable.
Well, if they did it today, they might have to consult their internal diversity grid to
my god.
a thing that actually happened at Blizzard.
Oh man, it's just whenever people try to quantify diversification efforts like that, like I'm sure your models help for efficiency, but the thing about telling a story that isn't horribly racist is that it's not about efficiency. Like, you can't do that in an efficient way. You have to just care about other people.
Right. So Power Girl's chasing around Terraman. Terraman teases Power Girl about her new origin, which she got from Jeff Johns in Infinite Crisis, where it basically took her back to her original story from the 70s, where she is, in fact, Supergirl from Earth 2, and is just the last survivor of that dead reality. Something we'll talk about later. He taunts her by calling her Supergirl Light. Power Girl fights her, and she is halted by Black Adam.
Yeah, I really, really love this scene for a lot of reasons. Number one, the fight between... So the fight between Terra Man and Power Girl, it's really dynamic, I thought. And it also plays over the credits, essentially. Like, this is what would be happening right after the Lost theme song, you know, essentially. It's like, this is giving you a lot of action right after setting up a mystery, and it really works as a way to sort of obfuscate the things in the previous page and then also introduce the new conflict. And I think Power Girl is just really written well here. This is like the kind of sprightly, tough girl stuff that I expect from the character when the voice is done really well. She's like infamously had kind of an inconsistent voice, I would say, where people were more interested in the costume than in the character. And I think here they're trying something new, which I think really sticks, which is that she is kind of an asshole, but on the side of good.
Yeah, this is very much the Power Girl we'll see codified into Amanda Connor and Jimmy Palmiotti's Power Girl series in 2008, 2009.
Which is like the iconic portrayal of Power Girl at this point. And anytime you see Power Girl in extraneous media, they're usually drawing from that run.
Yeah, I should note that the title, New World Order, is a thing conspiracists have liked to say for the past 70 years. It's also the name of Hulk Hogan's wrestling stable from the 90s.
Really?
Yeah. But New World Order originally rose to prominence when Woodrow Wilson coined it after World War One, when he was describing how in the aftermath of this calamity, much like our infinite crisis, we're all going to have to figure out a new way to live together. The status quo of all nations has to change.
Wow.
Which is literally what we're seeing happen right here.
It's such a good title. It's so much layered meaning.
Yeah.
It's so cool. I love comics.
I love comics.
What really grabbed me and what really got me to sort of sit up and pay attention about this issue and got me to subscribe for the rest of the run was the interaction between Power Girl and Black Adam, where it is a completely new, I mean, to me at the time when I was reading it, it was a new way of thinking about superheroes and like global politics.
It's really interesting you say that, because there's a very specific reason Power Girl is in this scene and then basically never seen again for the rest of 52.
Yeah.
It's that very early on in planning 52, I read Jeff Johns talking about this. When they were plotting the Black Adam arc, one of the things they were considering was maybe Black Adam hooks up with Power Girl and she becomes his love interest. And through Power Girl, Black Adam finds redemption. But they very quickly decided this was a bad idea and went another way with it.
I'm so glad they did.
And Power Girl is here as kind of a remnant of that earlier draft of 52.
Yeah. I mean, I'm glad they didn't go that way. I feel like that was
it would have been a mistake.
Would have been a mistake. And what they ended up doing was a whole hell of a lot better. Just way more interesting.
So Black Adam basically reiterates to Power Girl what he said back in Jeff Johns' Black Rain arc of JSA, where he first took control of Conduct, that superheroes aren't welcome here and they only bring trouble with them. And he's going to take responsibility for everything that happens here personally. Doesn't want Superman or anyone like him hanging around. Just going to bring trouble with them.
Yeah, this is like a very much post 9/11 comic.
Yeah.
Like, it's sometimes it's like assaulting when I dive into it. And it's like, wow, I'm learning so much about the airspace of this Middle Eastern flavored nation, fictional nation.
Yeah, airspace is not something I thought about a lot in 2006.
No, but certainly, I mean, 24 is definitely an influencer here, right? 24
absolutely.
Infamously was so beloved by the Bush administration that members of the Bush administration would make cameos in it. They were invited to like a global like defense industry conference and stuff like this. People really liked it.
It was pro-torture propaganda.
It really, really, really was.
The thesis of 24 was torture works. We have to keep doing it.
Yes, and it's so funny because all of the studies afterward have been like, actually, that's not true. Every single study of torture afterward has been like, people you torture are just as likely to give you false information as they are to give you real information because they simply want the pain to stop. Right. So maybe don't do it. And yet, like, the Jack Bauer is the lead character of 24 would end up being like an emblematic like hypothetical for Bush administration people to justify why they did torture. They were like, well, it worked for Jack Bauer. Jack Bauer gets into fictional situations where the only fictional solution is to torture people. But come on.
The only other thing I want to say about this scene is that Power Girl does kind of call Black Adam out. Like, weren't you just on the secret society of supervillains? Like, that was a thing he was doing with Luthor Jr. and Dr. Psycho and Deathstroke.
If you're like a teammate of Dr. Psycho, I feel like you cannot suddenly become a diplomat. Like, what about your former associate Deathstroke?
Yeah. So Black Adam just like, I kind of misunderstood what I was getting to there, which reinforces my point that I don't want super. The end. Case closed. Goodbye.
Yeah. It's interesting. This is like a political position that I think lots of nerds like to play a what if with, you know, and it's like, oh, well, you know, Superman actually enters the protected airspace. Blah, 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 blah. Like, it's like, you know, like a really boring version of the what if. The what if only becomes interesting when the opposition is also super powered. And that is something that I do think lots of other comic book writers have started to explore. You know, the disgraced comic book writer Warren Ellis, who was very influential, but also has been accused of grooming people on his forum, which is really upsetting. He wrote a couple of different books about what might happen if powered people got involved in global like geopolitical conflict.
Yeah, the Authority being a major example.
Yeah, he kind of got obsessed with that one idea and kept rewriting the same book, essentially.
James Gunn is going to make an Authority movie, so we haven't heard the last of that.
Yeah, and here is like these writers' take on it, and I do agree. I kind of don't want to see this ever again in terms of... Like, I don't want to see a fake Middle Eastern nation ever again. I would rather see people from the Middle East writing from their own perspective.
Yeah.
But this take on it is okay.
One thing, while we're talking about superheroes in politics, that I'd be remiss not to bring up that I don't think we've ever discussed on this show before, is that at the same time 52 is happening, over at Marvel, they're publishing Civil War.
Uh-huh. Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense that it would happen.
That's their Bush era comic.
Yeah, that Civil War, you'll have to listen to a different podcast for Marvel takes, but it is high-key a Bush era comic. It just really is.
And there are a lot of conversations in there that are just like this Power Girl Black Adam one, but 52 ultimately goes in a different direction.
Yeah, and don't look for any kind of satisfying resolution from Civil War. Just don't.
In general, don't look for satisfying resolutions from comics.
Yeah, they're designed to go on forever. The fact that this has one is really kind of remarkable.
Exactly.
Okay, what happens in the rest of this week? Okay, day 2, we are in Metropolis again at Steelworks. We finally revisit John and Natasha, and they are having a kind of argument that I definitely had with my parents.
Natasha wants to go to this science symposium. Steel won't let her because she needs to retake an English class. It's kind of what we were seeing a couple weeks ago in 52 #1, where John locks up Natasha's steel suit because he is worried about her. He wants her to grow up right. He still sees her as a little girl. It's not necessarily indicative of what we've seen of John and Natasha's relationship up to this point.
Yeah.
It feels like it's kind of going in a new direction here. But it is one that fits thematically with 52, about a new generation of heroes trying to pick up the void left by the last one.
I like this scene a lot. I know that we keep alluding to this, but in future issues, some of the writing in this conflict doesn't always hash out in a way that I feel like it makes Natasha look unreasonable.
Yeah.
But here it fits really perfectly in that CW space of teenage melodrama, where she has a reasonable complaint. She aced the rest of her classes. See, for me, it was in the opposite direction. I did terribly in math and science, but excellent in all the humanities stuff.
Sure, we're comic people.
Yeah, exactly. I'm a writer for a living. I don't do math. But she was not aware that she was going to go to summer school. And it does seem like a huge waste of her time. But at the same time, her uncle is correct that if she had done better in English, she wouldn't be in this position, and she can't afford to only do things that come easily to her. She has to also do the things that are hard. It's like a tough love moment. And as a Black person, I will say Black parents love a tough love moment. They certainly do.
Okay, so this part rings true to you.
Oh, very, very, very much so. It feels correct that she would be resentful at the result of this, but also like now that I'm older, I absolutely see where John is coming from. Like, this is a lesson that you should learn while you're a teenager, so you don't have to learn it while you're an adult.
I don't know. This whole time, I just keep thinking about how Natasha kind of literally went to the planet Apocalypse to save her uncle when he got into shit over his head. And it's like, at that point, let the girl do what she wants to do.
If she wants to drop out and get a GED, I'm sure that's fine.
Yeah.
But she's good at school. This is like this feels like Buffy the Vampire Slayer in a lot of ways, right?
The other thing is she does want to be a scientist.
Yeah.
And she wants to work at Steelwork. So I guess she has to do all the steps in between, even if she thinks she's bigger than them.
Yeah. You can see what he's trying to teach her here and what she doesn't want to learn, which is that just because you are gifted does not mean that people will give things to you. And that definitely comes up in later issues.
Shall we go to Tuesday?
Let's do it. This scene is very fun. Also, this is where we're back in Kandak. And Black Adam is getting an offer from Intergang that he does not really take too kindly to.
Noose and Roughhouse, who are two characters who were introduced in Adventures of Superman in the 90s. Intergang's always kind of been in the Superman vicinity. They were introduced kind of in Jack Kirby's New Gods stuff, which played into his run on Superman's pal, Jimmy Olsen, which has always been this kind of organized crime ring that traffics in alien weaponry and secretly reports to Darkseid, which is kind of interesting because they feel a little bit like a small-time organization compared to, say, the God of Evil. But I think that's due to the fact that the mythology of Darkseid has just been built up so much over the decades since the 70s.
Yes. Darkseid is just such an appealing concept. Like, it's just, the mythology builds itself the more that you think about it. You're really thinking you can spend like 2 seconds thinking about the anti-life equation and you're like, this is the most interesting thing that's ever been done.
Yeah.
You know?
Kirby had it.
Yeah, he had the juice, man. He absolutely, rest in peace to the goat.
He was the real deal.
He really was. It's the basic building blocks of that scientific concept, and then having his ultimate antagonist there, or the hero of the story being someone who can free themselves from any trap, is just the evocative imagery you have there, the intensity of the emotional storytelling there. It really works.
I could talk about New Gods forever, and I will. And
yes,
I feel like
this
is not that podcast. Maybe in a future episode.
Oh, that would be so fun.
Oh man. New Gods. And you can't just build an empire on anybody's back. And that's why Stan Lee picked Jack. Anyway, Intergang is here offering Black Adam a literal deal with the devil.
Yep.
In that, hey, you're the new guy in town with the major three powers of Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman off the board. We see you're basically the big cheese around here. So here's $2 million and a virgin we found. Like they could just buy a god for that.
Yeah.
It's insulting.
It's very insulting. And also Black Adam was once an enslaved person. So he doesn't really take kindly to being given a slave. In fact, he doesn't take kindly to it to the degree that he crushes one of the men's head with his hand.
Yeah. Presumably kills the other one. It's very messy. And rightfully so. It shows us that Black Adam is not your daddy's champion of Shazam. And Terra Man shows up outside his window like, hey, that was pretty cool, man.
Yes. This is, again, like you can see where The Rock was like, I gotta be this guy.
Oh, yeah.
Like, The Rock has all these stipulations in the Fast and Furious franchise about how he can't lose fights and how many punches he's allowed to take in the movie.
Yeah.
And you can see, like, Black Adam is a guy who wins every fight.
Yeah, he's not allowed to lose.
Yeah, exactly. So you can see how this would appeal to The Rock's ego. But, I mean, in this case, the hierarchy of the DC universe is actually about to change. Whereas in The Rock's case, it didn't really happen.
I will say, way back in Black Adam's first appearance in 1945, he easily defeats the entire Captain Marvel family. They're not even a match for him. But the person who ultimately defeats him is Billy Batson's unpowered, bumbling Uncle Dudley, who tricks him into saying Shazam.
That's really great.
So you can't beat Black Adam in a fight, but you can trick him.
Yeah, he's a very literal-minded person.
Yeah.
You know? So I think that would work quite handily. I like it when heroes are set up with weaknesses like that. You know, it reminds me a little bit of the Superman animated series episode with Mitzi Spitlick.
Oh, yes.
Where, like,
played by the late lamented Gilbert Gottfried.
Oh, and he's so good at it. And he's got this foxy girlfriend also that I love, like, she's big blonde.
Because every Bruce Timm character needs a foxy girlfriend.
I mean, I think it works out well. Bruce Timm, lover of women. I really think it's fine. Because, I mean, like, it's the Quentin Tarantino problem for me, right?
Yes.
Where he's fetishizing the women he creates, which is gross. But he's fetishizing some really, really interesting women.
Yeah, me and the bad bitch I pulled by being autistic.
Literally, yes. Gosh, so speaking of pulling bad bitches by being autistic, I guess it's a segue that works here.
It's time for Booster Gold.
Oh my god, yes. If Booster Gold is not on the autism spectrum, I would be very surprised.
I think he's on the ADHD spectrum.
Yeah, he's somewhere in the neurodiverse realm, for sure. His concentration problems, his inability to stick to a single plan, that definitely does speak to ADHD rather than...
I think Blue Beetle and Booster are a classic autism ADHD couple.
Like the couple I'm currently in.
Yeah.
That makes so much sense. Anyway, so in this scene here, it's a very cute little setup. Skeets is there, and he's asking this hot dog vendor, do you mind moving your... Oh.
You say hot dog vendor, but you want to read that label on the cart for me?
It's a Euro cart. I'm so sorry.
It's Senor Euro. But
Senor Euro.
When the cart goes toppling, it's all hot dog.
Yeah, that's why I thought it was a hot dog, because I wasn't looking at the... Oh, my God.
This is another flub by our racist artist, Joe Bennett.
Oh, my God. Come on.
Yeah, come on, dude.
It's like, not only is that it doesn't look like a hot dog cart because the hot dogs come out of it, but I assumed because it only has hot dog condiments on it too.
Yeah.
The most iconographic thing on it are those yellow and red squeeze bottles for mustard and ketchup. And you don't put those things on a gyro. That would be nasty.
Yeah. This scene was specifically written for a gyro cart. And in fact, they included a recipe for Senor Hero Zeros in the back matter.
That's so funny.
Which I'm going to put in the chat right now.
Oh my God, that's so funny.
Yeah.
But yes, so Skeets is asking this guy to move his Euro cart that is mysteriously full of hot dog condiments and materials. And it's because he's counting down in approximately 4, 3, 2, 1 second, there's a giant guy in a mech-powered suit that explodes onto the scene. This guy's cart is ruined anyway, so at least it's not exploded, I guess, is the idea.
This guy in the mech suit, his name is Shockwave. He originally debuted as a Blue Devil villain in the 80s and has been kind of like a stock villain for heroes to beat up in scenes where you just need a nobody villain to beat up. Kind of like what we saw with Mammoth in the first issue. At this point in Booster Gold's career, the point is he's basically just taking on jobbers.
Yeah, he's covered in more logos than the last time we've seen him, I believe. Yeah. And he's really putting on a show of it. He's saying a lot of things really loudly in front of an audience. And Skeets is also directing everybody to watch him and observe him, save the city and telling them what their name is.
He calls him the champion of the oppressed, which is a direct callback to Action Comics #1. That was Superman's original sobriquet.
Wow, that's very funny.
Mm-hmm.
It's also so interesting. I hope that that's something that comes up again in the future with Superman. It definitely seems like current Superman media is trending in that direction.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah.
The people's champion is what he was designed to be. People don't talk about it a lot, but Jerry Siegel was a socialist. And
that's so cool.
Yeah. A lot of those early comic book guys were. And then after World War II happened, they had to be absolutely pro-cap. Oh, I've never had a socialist.
It does actually remind me a lot of the development of anime and manga in Japan, where, the event that made it much harder for people to be leftists in Japan openly is a little bit more extreme, where there was an online debate between some leftists and some fascists, and the fascists killed the leftist on television. So, that's a bit more of an outright threat.
Yeah.
But, Miyazaki is just an old, grunchy socialist guy. And Studio Ghibli is not run as a hierarchy, but run through a series of committees like lots of socialist organizations are. So you can pretty much put 2 and 2 together there.
All right. So Booster's fighting Shockwave, doing a lot of property damage, but keeping people safe. What happens after that?
Yeah, after that, Booster Gold says he has to go to a much more important autograph session, which is signing an advertising deal with a pharmaceutical company.
Of course.
Yeah, that is much more important than saving the people, right? Is getting paid.
This company is called Actaeon Holt. Actaeon is maybe a reference to the mythological grandson of Cadmus, kind of an important word around these parts.
Fascinating.
And Holt is the last name of Michael Holt, the current Mr. Terrific, who's kind of a billionaire multi-conglomerate dude.
Yeah.
Third smartest man on Earth and all. He's got his fingers in a lot of pies.
Yeah. But while Booster is celebrating, the person he's trying to deal with is picked up by the government for securities fraud.
Right.
So funny.
So we see that Skeets seems to continue to be getting his predictions of what's going to happen in the future wrong, steering Booster in the exact opposite direction of his intentions.
This is also a classic ADHD guy blunder.
Yeah.
Because yeah, you say it's good. Yeah, whatever. Okay, I'm just going to do it.
Well, my robot said.
Yeah, very much.
And this is why we can't give too much credence to the AI.
No.
We can't do everything ChatGPT tells us to do, even if it seems like a good idea.
Hell, you can't even follow Google Maps directions like 75% of the time these days, I remember when Google Maps first started and they kept trying to tell me and my dad to drive over this railroad.
Yeah.
It's like, you have to trust your own eyes.
DC editor Chris Conroy, he recently said something like, the days where you could tell someone, let me Google that for you sardonically are over, because that's absolutely useless now.
No, I mean, I'm at the point where I might be using DuckDuckGo as my default search engine. Searching for things on Google, you get a bunch of sponsored Amazon links, and then those weird AI generated questions that don't give you the right information. And then now you get a slideshow of images also. Useless.
Yeah. What's going on there?
I want to know what's on the internet. Just give me the links.
All right.
So the next day of the week, we are at Star Labs, which is where John was called away for because he was told that he needed to help them identify a body.
Because he's the biggest superhero left in Metropolis and the guy who would probably know the body best.
And what he discovers, he's of course identifying the corpse of Lex Luthor that was revealed in the beginning.
Who we saw back in Night 1.
Yes. At this point, what the most significant thing that he uncovers is that this corpse is wearing contacts, but they were possibly inserted post-mortem.
Right.
Before he can go down the line of thought that he is proposing, guess who shows up?
Lex Luthor himself, alive and well and with a retinue of the media.
Oh, he is there for a photo op, and John is pissed. He is not happy about this.
Lex Luthor brilliantly shows up and says, hey, there was a doppelganger who was doing all the crimes that I've been accused of over the last 6 years. Everything that's gone wrong since I ran for president and was the darling of the people was this guy who kidnapped me and put me in an alternate dimension while he did all the evil stuff that you think I did.
It's such a Lex Luthor move. I love it.
And the devious thing is that Steele can't even deny it because Alexander Luthor Jr. literally did that in Year of the Villain and Infinite Crisis. So he didn't do everything, but there were some things he did. So Luthor is casting enough doubt on it for everyone to be like, well, did he do that stuff? Maybe it was this guy.
Plausible deniability, baby. That's how it works. Yeah. And he is specifically, what makes it a supervillain plan is he specifically knew that John would be the only person around to identify the body. And even though no one trusts Lex Luthor, they do trust John because they just saw him saving the city and helping people out. So he's using John, really using him to gain more credibility for himself.
Just taunting him, hey, you probably found the colored contacts, right?
Oh my God.
And John is just go fuck yourself, dude.
It's a really perfect if you've ever had to deal with a really frustrating man before.
This is why Lex Luthor is my favorite villain in comics.
Same.
People ask me all the time who the best villain is. And, I do love the Joker. I love a man who loves to laugh. Everyone has their favorites. People love the Rogues. People love Captain Cold. Darkseid is this great, but nobody is as fun as Lex.
It's true.
Yeah, because you gotta be a real piece of shit to get under Superman's skin, and that's what he does.
It's really perfect. I love it.
Oh man, yeah.
So also, I want to note before we move on to the next day, day 6. we get this one panel that shows this television broadcast in an unseen up until that point location, and there is a metal tube with a little worm in it. What could this mean? I missed that on my first read through, actually. I only just saw it now because it does happen again at the end of the issue.
Yeah, it happens again at the end, which is what I was confusing it with. But yeah, we see the TV on from the lab from issue 1 of 52, where Dr. Savannah was abducted. The TV is still on, so it's been running this whole time. That poor man's electric bill. He's probably running it off some tortured den of electric eels or something. But yeah, we see that worm right there. Nice catch.
Yeah, it's in the foreground, but it's also off to the side.
Yeah.
So it looks like it could just be an incidental detail, but it shows up in a couple of panels. So we'll talk about it more in a second.
Yeah, that TV broadcast takes us to day 6, where Black Adam is addressing the Kondak Embassy, where the Themysciran Embassy in Greg Rucka's run once stood.
So he is there. He's called a press conference. Of course, all the most important reporters in Metropolis are there, which means Lois Lane.
Of course.
My icon forever.
Everyone's darling.
Lois Lane is so great.
Best reporter ever.
She is. She deserves 6 or 7 Pulitzers, I believe.
She deserves to swim through them like Scrooge McDuck.
She looks I really like this design of her also. She's had a lot of different looks, but this sort of kind of too long hair where it looks like she got a haircut like 6 months ago and then just didn't get another one. But also the pearls and the red jacket, I think is a great look for her.
Yeah, this is the Superman the Animated Series look, but with a different colored jacket.
Yeah, she does strike me as a girl who loves a blazer. So I really enjoy it.
She blazes.
She really is a trailblazer. So the press conference is there. Black Adam is there, and he's giving a monologue about how Kondak is going to protect its own airspace, pretty much. And Terra Man is there as well. Terra Man thinks that Black Adam is going to cut a deal with him, but instead he would like to send a message. And the message he would like to send is, he literally tears Terra Man in half. His torso and his legs are 2 separate pieces. Everybody's splattered with blood.
Because nerds are who they are, there was a lot of complaints about this scene at the time that there wasn't enough gore here. There should be like viscera everywhere if you're going to rip a man in half.
I mean, I guess that's true, but also chill out.
Yeah. A, chill out. B, what I'm going to point out is if you look closely at that panel where Black Adam is ripping Terra Man's legs off, you can see there's a lot of negative space there. Yeah. I'm going to bet dollars to donuts that page was originally a lot gorier, and they were like, let's tone it back.
Yeah, especially there's a little insert of Lois like trying to cover her face, and she's being hit with like chunks of meat. It's disgusting.
This is a recurring image throughout the Harley Quinn animated series, where when someone blows up, just organs go everywhere.
I really got to watch the new season of that.
Yeah.
Kaylee Cuoco is honestly really, really good as Harley Quinn.
He's great, but Lake Bell as a Poison Ivy is incredible.
Oh my God. No, Lake Bell's Poison Ivy is like an iconic portrayal of the character. I think she's fantastic.
Who doesn't love eco-terrorist Daria? It's such a good choice.
That's so smart.
Yeah, so they have this whole heartfelt conversation while like a whole ass kidney is in Harley's hair. It's great.
That's so funny. All right, so at the end of this issue, essentially, the image we leave the readers on is Black Adam's just teared a man in half. He says that Kondak will protect Kondak, essentially. A very like sort of anti-spreading democracy message, you know? No nation building shall be going on there. But then the final panel is a close-up of that worm watching television.
Yeah. Well, not just that worm. That worm has woven itself a cocoon. Maybe it's not a worm, but something else.
Dun, dun, dun.
Yeah, and Black Adam reiterates his point from earlier that's like, it's time for heroes who don't just patrol the world, they change it. So he's going full authority here.
Yeah.
He's in his Warren Ellis era.
He really is. This is what makes 52 so interesting. They really like slam a whole bunch of comic book genres and ideas into the same book.
Right.
And somehow it all works out.
Because it's about the diversity of story in the DC universe. These are all the different kinds of stories you can tell with these characters if they're given the space to be told.
It feels more like a shared universe than a whole bunch of different books kind of occupying the same space, sort of, because we get to see how one story is happening literally concurrently at the same time as another story.
The problem with most shared universes as they're designed together from the ground up, because they have to adhere to that kind of lowest common denominator between all of those stories so everyone can kind of meet in the middle, everyone involved ends up sounding and feeling kind of samey.
Yeah.
What's great about DC in particular, this is what I love about DC as opposed to Marvel, which was always designed for these characters to kind of know each other and be friends since at least the 60s, is that all of these characters were designed in isolation. The idea of like a consistent shared universe kind of came later. And because they were given that space to evolve on their own, you're given this world with just radically different characters from each other who feel like they shouldn't coexist, but that's what makes it interesting.
Yes. I mean, the big thing about DC that to me is really interesting are the amount of fictional cities. But that's also because you can see the direct inspiration of the real cities that they're based on. One of the most interesting ways that I think people describe the difference between Metropolis and Gotham is that Metropolis is the possibility of New York during the day, right? When you're out and, grabbing a hot dog and going to this enormous, beautiful public park, and you see very much literally the city of tomorrow just right in front of your eyes. But Gotham is the danger of New York at night, the seediness, but also the excitement, underground clubs and crimes and darkness and neon and all that kind of stuff.
I've also heard Metropolis is New York above 14th Street and Gotham is New York below 14th Street.
I mean, that's also extremely accurate, right? Yeah. Up until very recently, I think in the early 2000s, living below 14th Street was a more feasible and also like a cool thing to do.
Yeah. So I guess that would make me Metropolis and you Gotham.
I think out in Brooklyn, I qualify as Bloodhaven. I love also that there's just a city in the DC universe called Bloodhaven.
It's actually technically pronounced Bloodhaven. Note the umlaut.
It's Bloodhaven. Come on, we're American.
It was founded by Danish whalers, Gita.
Oh my God, they're like, oh, the blood goes here.
Yeah, this is where the blood goes. It's the haven for blood. You got to keep it somewhere.
You got to keep it. Wales, they got a lot of blood, so this is where the blood lives. Oh my gosh! So that idea of these universes becoming something that happens after the fact in DC Comics is actually something that this week's backup material sort of kind of strives to explain, or at least through the fiction of the DC universe.
A brief Let's Talk talent. Same talent as we saw in the last backup. This is the Dan Jurgens show with some support by Art Thibert and various editors, continuing to tell the story of the history of the DC universe. Where last week was very concerned with the fictional history of just everything that happened before the modern era of these stories, as is concerned by the perspective of the people who live in the world, at least as it was understood in 2006. It's a very different story now. Listen to last week's episode to hear us talk more about that. Now we're going to talk about the differences between Earth 1 and Earth 2.
So what's interesting to me about this is Donna Troy essentially acts as the audience surrogate here. She's having the history of the DC universe explained to her, and she asks the logical questions that I think a person would have.
Yeah.
Like, what's the differences between these two things? Well, Earth 1 is the one
on Earth 1, people walk like this. And on Earth 2, people walk like this.
Exactly. On Earth 2, women be shopping. It's basically the basic summary that she's given is that Earth 1 is the one that that has a whole bunch of superheroes, and some of these superheroes, you might not remember, but they used to be ones you had adventures with. And Earth 2 is the one where Superman was a little boy, and there's just not as many superheroes, and it's like a completely different continuity and even future. Earth 1 has a future that is a little bit different from the future that Earth 2 experiences.
The first difference that this feature notes is the idea that Superman was Superboy in Silver Age continuity, whereas he kind of started as Superman in Metropolis in the Golden Age. The Golden Age corresponding to Earth 2, the Silver Age corresponding to Earth 1. Golden Age was everything that happened in DC Comics from, say, 1935 to 1956. And the Silver Age is everything from 1956 to 1970. But there's also a Bronze Age, which isn't really a continuity division. That's a common misconception. So really, they're talking about everything from 1956 to 1985. Got it? That's Earth 1.
Cool.
Okay. So the Justice Society of like Alan Scott and Jay Garrick exists in Earth 2, and the Justice League exists on Earth 1. The Teen Titans and a bunch of other weirdos show up in Earth 1 who are like inspired by the boom of sci-fi interest. There's a discussion about the Legion of Superheroes here, where the AI talking to Donna kind of makes some cryptic references to the fact that maybe not all of that was erased by the crisis, because the Legion of Superheroes has the most complicated backstory and history of anything in comics.
It's so stressful.
Yeah, good luck getting into the Legion of Superheroes. It has its fans. The Legion started as a spin-off of the Superboy feature in the Silver Age and Adventure Comics, where a bunch of heroes from 1,000 years in the future go back in the past to meet the original hero, Superman, but they go a little too far and they see him as a boy. And he goes to the future, has a bunch of adventures with them, and that's kind of how he starts his superhero career with these teen heroes who he would basically never see again for the rest of his life.
I read a pretty fun run where it was Supergirl that they were hanging out with instead, and
that was Mark Waid.
Yeah,
Supergirl and the Legion of Superheroes from around this time.
That was really fun because I think he got the brief in terms of these are teenagers. This is like Teen Titans in the future, and I really enjoyed like the competing like love triangles and all that kind of stuff. Brainiac 5 is a very fun character. I think and genuinely a great idea for a character. Also,
the Legion of Superheroes, as they existed in the 50s and 60s, were kind of DC's competition with the drama of Marvel's X-Men, and there was a clear winner.
Yeah, one of them became such a fundamentally influential cultural phenomenon that Magneto and Professor X is like a legible conflict no matter who you are on the fucking planet, and the other is the Legion of Superheroes.
And the other has Matter Eater Lad and Bouncing Boy.
Matter Eater Lad is still one of the funniest ideas for characters I've ever thought of in my life.
You know who came up with Matter Eater Lad is Jerry Siegel himself.
I love you, Jerry Siegel. You're an icon. You will always be famous. During
Jerry Siegel's second tenure with DC, he left because he was mad that DC basically stole Superman from him.
Yep.
And then he came back because he needed money.
Yep.
So during that second run, he created a bunch of stuff for the Legion of Superheroes. And some of the most ridiculous ideas come from that era because Jerry Siegel always primarily thought of himself as a comedy writer as opposed to an action writer.
Yeah.
And the Legion is really where he got to stretch that.
Matter Eater Lad is genuinely comedy gold. So salute to you, Jerry Siegel. You did a great job.
Yeah. And that leads us all up to the Crisis and this kind of ominous image of a split screen between the Monitor and the Anti-Monitor.
Yeah.
The thing in 1985 that would be like, forget everything you just heard. None of that matters anymore.
Yeah.
Now we're going to restart from scratch. These two worlds have one shared history that we're going to figure out together.
So what's really interesting to me about these 4 pages is that it basically describes, like, through the fiction of the DC universe, why a Crisis crossover might occur, right? Donna Troy is basically saying, this is all really, really complicated and confusing. And then they're like, and next week we're going to talk about the Anti-Monitor.
Yeah. And that brings us to the end of week 3.
Oh my God. This, I mentioned at the top of the episode, this is where I really think the comic gets its stride.
Yeah.
To me, this is like when they begin to fire on all cylinders. I love this issue. I think it's perfect. I have no notes, except maybe more Vic Sage and Renee Montoya. That's all I ever want to see.
Well, they can't be here every week. But the fact that there's no Vic Sage and Renee Montoya means that I get to talk about something else for my favorite scene.
Okay, what's your favorite scene? Tell me.
My favorite scene this week is absolutely Lex Luthor's shit-eating grin when he walks in to see his body double plan has gone exactly as he anticipated and just plays John Henry Irons like a damn fiddle. And he can do absolutely nothing about it. And it's the start of my favorite conflict in this entire series, the Luthor versus Steel conflict, which is going to reach a glorious head about 37 weeks from now.
Steel is so cool, and they should do another Steel movie.
Yeah.
Just do it. Just do it. So many people would be great Steel.
Which athlete would you cast as Steel in the modern Steel?
Which athlete would I cast?
Yeah, it's gotta be an athlete again.
Oh my God, if it has to be an athlete again. Brawny Braun would be terrible. We can't do that. He would be awful.
Not much better than Shaq.
No.
Better, but not much better.
What if we did Shaq again, but Shaq now? Where he's just like a lazy son of a bitch. That would be really funny.
Shaq tonight.
Yes. God. If it has to be an athlete, Marshawn Lynch, actually, from the Ravens, the Seattle Ravens. Yeah. He was recently in Bottoms. Yeah. He's incredibly charismatic and a really fun performer. So he has the chemistry. And also he's like a big dude. I think he could really pull it off.
Good pick. Yeah. Absolutely. What's your favorite scene this week, Gita?
Okay, so my favorite scene this week, honestly, is the Black Adam defending Conduct's airspace with the interaction he has with Power Girl.
Right.
I mentioned earlier in the episode, I just think, one, it's really well written, and it definitely gives a solid template for who Power Girl was going to be from this moment on. And like what her struggle was. Something she really didn't have up until this point was like a general reason to exist.
Yeah.
And now she is a post-crisis mystery, which gives her a lot more to chew on as a character. And also she is much punchier and like more fun to be around, which I really appreciate, giving her a good sort of back and forth with Black Adam, even though Black Adam, his voice is also very defined here as a sort of, he's a man of few words and hyperviolence.
Yeah.
I also think that it's just a really interesting document. I think all the time about the way that America was and the culture we made was after 9/11. You know, at the time that this was running, we were also seeing those Disney Channel, like weird adverts that they were doing where the stars of the Disney Channel would talk about their feelings about 9/11.
Yes.
We were obsessed with this. And I mean, for good reason. It was an incredibly traumatizing thing to have happen. But we were still thinking about it. And a lot of our politics of the era was completely wrapped up in this idea of preventing another 9/11. So many comic books. I remember the reveal in the comic book where there's a superhero mayor of New York, Ex Machina.
Ex Machina, yes.
Yes. The reveal that he could only save one of the towers and that he was, internally feeling guilt for only being able to save one. That moment of reveal, it definitely gives you, it definitely gives you an idea of how superhero fiction was beginning to be positioned in our popular imaginary. You know, if Jerry Siegel invented Superman as a person to save his father who's died in a corner store robbery, then a lot of other superhero writers at the time were beginning to think of superheroes as someone who could have saved the towers.
Yeah.
And also thinking about what would happen if you were a person in Iraq and you wanted to have a hero, for instance. You know?
Yeah, I mean, my theory about Ex Machina is the reason it won all of those awards is literally just that one panel where you see one of the Twin Towers revealed.
Yeah, at the time reading it, in the Bush administration, it was like getting punched in the heart. Like, we were still seeing images of the crater like basically every day on the news. It is hard to understand now how pervasive the feeling of needing to be pro-America and needing to be a vocal supporter of our military efforts throughout the world in the name of preventing terrorism. Like, you could not criticize it.
Did you have a huge American flag hanging in front of your house?
No, because my parents are old hippies.
Nice.
Yeah, but we definitely had one on our block. Yeah.
We had a big one draped over our garage door that we never opened because it had been converted into a den by the previous owners. So we just had this non-functional garage that we used as an American flag display case.
Yeah, no, my parents took me to that massive protest, one of the very first No War for Oil protests. And I remember going and thinking, like, there must be like thousands and thousands of people here. Like, there must be like a lot of people here. And then I went on the news that night and they underreported it by a huge degree. They said there was something like 10,000 there. There was a lot more. So, and I remember the Dixie Chicks, my mom going out and buying a Dixie Chicks CD after, I'm sorry, they're just called the Chicks now.
The Chicks?
Yeah. My mom went out and bought a CD to support them after they were, they criticized Bush in a European tour and were summarily punished publicly in America for having any criticism of the president. So like that's where my mom also warned me about the Patriot Act being able to gain access to my library book checkouts and warning me from she said, I can get you any book that you want. Just let me know because you don't need to have the government putting you on a list. Too bad, Mom. I'm definitely already on a list. So.
I still think they should have changed their name to like the Pixie Sticks or something. Keep the assonance.
I know. I think it's like, I know that we don't want to be celebrating Dixie these days, but
yeah.
You do need the assonance. The Chicks is just not as good as a name.
My favorite joke in disgraced comedian Aziz Ansari's Master of None. Did you watch this show?
Oh, I didn't finish it, but I definitely watched a little bit of it.
There's this joke in season 1 where they meet with this organization that's trying to rename the Washington Redskins the Washington Breadsticks. Because if you say it really fast, it basically sounds the same. It's barely a change. And everyone loves breadsticks.
That's so funny. I feel like they almost probably went with that. That's
That's just like a pure Harris Whittle joke.
It really is.
Yeah.
Do you want to check out the Blackboard for this week?
Let's go to the Blackboard.
All right. I have something really silly and obscure that I want to put up on there as like a deep connection this has to another piece of media. But
let's talk about it.
In the backup, you see for 1 second this really weird looking guy that with a subtitle, The Creeper. Mm-hmm. And the Creeper was a Batman villain, but the way that you might actually have interacted with the Creeper if you don't know this character who is pretty obscure and like hasn't successfully has not really ever successfully caught on as a villain. I know they've had their own book occasionally.
I do have to actually hear
okay, you do know literally everything about comic books.
Let's talk about who the Creeper was originally. The Creeper was created by Steve Ditko. Who created Our Boy the Question, created Ted Kord, co-created Spider-Man, and Don Segal. Created him as one of the first heroes for when he switched over to DC from Charlton Comics, as kind of this sort of Hamlet figure, as he was by day reporter Jack Ryder, but by night he would kind of dress up as this demon character who would pretend to be crazy in order to intimidate people. So he was a vigilante, and it's really only in this new Batman Adventures episode that we're about to talk about that he becomes perceived as being related at all to Batman.
Yeah, and my entire preconception of this character was that he was a Batman villain for like literally my entire life.
He was a hero the whole time. He even joins the Outsiders at one point.
That's a very strange idea for a character, but you can't really count on Steve Ditko for being normal.
Right.
Yeah.
This is a guy who created Shade the Changing Man.
Shade is so weird, but I love Shade so much.
Yeah.
But the Creeper, other than showing up in a very fun episode of Batman the Animated Series.
The new Batman Adventures.
The new Batman Adventures, which is not Batman the Animated Series.
Right. It's the series they made after Batman the Animated Series with a different art style, which went on around the same time as Superman the Animated Series.
Yeah. It's okay, but not as good as Batman the Animated Series, I'll say.
Sure.
It's possibly apocryphal, but it is something I choose to believe, is that I remember watching a cartoon called Freakazoid when I was a child.
Oh, super teen extraordinaire.
In a prescient image of my own future, he is a person whose mind is corrupted by the internet and becomes a blue-skinned freakazoid that is a superhero, but in a sort of Bugs Bunny-ish way where he's doing bits and gags all the time. You know, much like Friends, the television show was once an adaptation of the movie, Cameron Crowe movie Singles, that had so many changes made to it that it feels just like as a property completely distinct from Singles at that point. What I will choose to believe, and what I once read on the internet, but you know anyone can put something online, is that Freakazoid was once an adaptation of the Creeper, but got changed so many times that they had to make it as its own distinct property as Freakazoid.
I have heard this, and I am here to set the record straight.
Tell me
about the Creeper-Freakazoid connection.
Tell me.
Here we go. In 1995, the Freakazoid TV show was developed by two names you may be familiar with, Bruce Timm and Paul Dini.
Oh, Oh.
Yeah, they were the masterminds behind Freakazoid. Bruce Timm quit it very early on because Freakazoid was made into a much sillier, cartoonier character than he had in mind. That show gets canceled in 1997. And in 1998, the new Batman Adventures comes out with this Creeper episode. And the point of the Creeper episode is Bruce Timm going, this is how I would have done Freakazoid.
Fascinating.
So that's the connection between the two.
Oh, and that makes so much sense why people assumed Freakazoid was an adaptation of the Creeper all these years.
Other way around.
That's so interesting.
The Creeper that we see in the new Batman Adventures, who is the most popular version of the Creeper because it's a really compelling episode, just as Batman the Animated Series reinvented so many other comic book characters. Mr. Freeze never had a tragic wife before Heart of Ice. I could go on about that, and I certainly will in a future episode. But I would be remiss not to mention that Mike Allred has contended basically for years that Freakazoid is straight up them stealing his Madman concept, which when you read Madman is kind of unforgivable. It is really spookily familiar.
Mike Allred has such a distinctive illustration style and also writing style.
Yeah.
That you can recognize it from a mile away.
Right.
And I do see and feel some of that DNA in Freakazoid.
They claim it's a coincidence, but who knows?
You know, if you're a professional in comics, you are probably reading a lot of comics, and that's all I'll say.
I would be hard pressed to say that Paul Dini was not aware of Madman.
Yeah, but it's also like people that accidentally, songwriters that accidentally steal melodies, or, the major reason why authors say, please don't show me your fan fiction is that you absorb ideas really quickly when you read them, and sometimes you reproduce them and you don't know where they came from.
Robin Williams stole jokes all the time. He didn't know he was doing it. It was just like a joke vacuum.
Yeah, just hoovering him up. Yeah. He was a person who was deeply involved in the comedy community. So he is seeing a lot of jokes all the time. And probably some of them got filtered through his brain and reproduced.
Right.
It happens very frequently. I know the most recent example, my celebrity gossip corner for a second.
Do we have a theme song for the celebrity gossip corner?
Oh my God. Let me get Maddie Myers to write one. She'll write a great one. So Olivia Rodrigo is currently a little bit sort of feuding with Taylor Swift, an artist that she was originally a huge fan of.
Oh, she's going to lose.
Well, it's because on Olivia Rodrigo's first album, Sour, she admitted to being inspired by the bridge of a Taylor Swift song, and then Jack Antonoff was put on the songwriting credits. Jack Antonoff being Swift's longtime collaborator and producer friend. And Paramore also claimed that Good For You sounds a lot like Misery Business, which sounds a lot like a generic Paramore song, I'll say. So right now, Taylor Swift has Sabrina Carpenter, who is rumored to be the other woman in Olivia Rodrigo's Sour album, and also Hayley Williams from Paramore opening for her on tour.
Did you know Taylor Swift shows up in a recent Strange Adventures comic?
No.
It's a Tom King, Mitch Gerads series. She shows up at a concert dressed like Adam Strange. It's great.
That fucking rules. Tom King is so funny. Dude.
That's absolutely a Mitch Gerads joke. Gerads is famously a Taylor Swift fan.
Oh my God, he's a Swiftie? That's adorable. I assumed it was from, Tom King has kids, and there's no way that they're not obsessed with Taylor Swift right now. I'm sure he's going to be going to the Eras Tour movie.
Oh, absolutely. But that was pure Mitch. Mitch is 100% in on the Swiftie fandom. He knows all the lore.
Adorable.
He's into it.
Well, listen, I believe that Taylor would do that, though.
Yeah.
I do believe that. I personally am not a fan of her music or her sort of her star persona, but I can't deny the cultural impact that she has.
Yeah. She is fascinating as an icon.
She is fascinating as an icon. It's really interesting, but this is not a Taylor Swift podcast. I don't even like her that much.
And it never will be.
No.
If you're my sister, stop listening now. Oh, Lord.
So what's on the Blackboard for you, my friend?
I got a couple things on the Blackboard.
Okay, I can't wait.
All right. First up, I want to talk about Power Girl. We got to talk about Power Girl. Terra Man kind of teases Power Girl here that she's a Supergirl light. And the backstory with that is back in the 1970s, DC had this whole line of comics that were set on Earth 2 while Earth 1 was still ongoing, which showed us what was happening with these Golden Age heroes. One of those titles was called All-Star Squadron. There was also All-Star Comics, just a bunch of stuff going on at the time. And one of those titles, they address the fact that there never was a Supergirl on Earth 2. So in this world, just as Superman was never Superboy, we find out that Kara Zor-El's rocket comes to Earth later than it would have on Earth 1. And she shows up in the modern day of Earth 2 when these Justice Society heroes are all getting older as one of the new guard of heroes. So one of the new heroes on Earth 2 is Superman's cousin, who adopts the name of Power Girl to differentiate her to readers from Supergirl. Then Crisis on Infinite Earths happens, which leaves us with a problem because after Crisis on Infinite Earths, the whole JSA history is folded in to the Justice League continuity that it happened in the past, but it would mean there are two Supergirls now. So we have to do something with Power Girl. Never mind the fact that the original Supergirl dies in Crisis on Infinite Earths. And the reason for that is there was this editorial idea that there should only be one Kryptonian on Earth. There should be a last Kryptonian, that's Superman, and that's it. That all these other Krypton characters dilutes the brand. But because Power Girl was already in the middle of all these other stories that were taking place with sort of the Infinity Inc. and the like that was going on, they needed to come up with a new backstory for her. So what they came up with was this idea that Power Girl was actually an Atlantean. She was the granddaughter of Aryan Lord of Atlantis, who was this magus who lived thousands of years before Atlantis. He had his own sword and sorcery series in the pre-crisis days. And they had this whole thing that she was like brainwashed into thinking she was Kryptonian, but she was actually magic. And that was her status quo for a while. And in Infinite Crisis, Jeff Johns is like, that's a mess. And this is already after Jeff Loeb had brought back Kara Zor-El in Superman Batman.
Yeah.
In like around 2004. So why not let her be Supergirl? So in this Infinite Crisis, the thesis of which is the multiverse is still kind of out there and there are people who remember it. Power Girl rediscovers her past, that she's actually the last survivor of Earth 2. Not just the last of her race, but the last of an entire reality. And it's that just colossal loss that's going to define her going forward.
It's such a better origin for her.
Yeah.
And it's stuck. And that's how you can tell.
Yeah.
You know, she is, I think, a kind of female character that is very popular to write in comics, which is like spunky girl with dark past. But here...
And big old bitties.
Yeah, I mean, the costume is the whole thing. I love the costume because cosplayers love it, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's the kind of thing where it's iconic. You can never change it. You just can't. You know, it's beautiful for cosplay.
They've tried to change it. It never looks right.
No, it
and
doesn't.
And people try to come up with, like, explanations for the window.
Oh, my God. The worst explanation I've read was when she was like, I tried to come up with a symbol, but nothing ever fit.
That was Jeff Johns. Jeff Johns wrote that.
It's just, come on. Sometimes girls like to show their titties. It's just fine. It's fine.
I like it. I like the way it looks. There was a very fun explanation in a recent Leo Williams comic where she's like, look, my boobs get sweaty. It needs air.
That's a big boobed girl problem. That makes perfect sense. It's like, it needs to be breathable down there.
Yeah.
It's so interesting, though, because like there were so many post-crisis versions of a different kind of Supergirl also. Like the idea of the last Kryptonian is really, really potent. Yeah. And I do always believe that Superman does need a little bit of time believing that he is literally the last Kryptonian. But just like I believe Batman becomes a more interesting character when he has a sort of family of people supporting him, I also feel the same about Superman. Like, Superman should be married to Lois and starting his own family and also have cousins and a super dog. Yeah. I just think it's nice.
Superheroes are more interesting with a large supporting cast, especially if you emphasize the differences between them rather than eliminating them so the sole survivor can be special.
And you know what? That's why they keep bringing back Zod, right?
Yeah.
That's why Zod is such a potent villain for Superman. It's the idea of a Kryptonian that isn't pure of heart and having those two clashes from two people from different alien culture or the same alien culture, just showing that Superman is good because he chooses to be good and that he could have chosen to be bad.
Well, I could have a whole conversation about Zod versus Jax Ur. Jax Ur fans, don't at me. About how Superman 2 basically hijacked his entire role in the Superman mythology. But yeah, Superman's got his share of Phantom Zone rogues, all of whom are potentially pretty interesting in their own right. The other thing I wanted to talk about is a thing that Lex Luthor says in my favorite scene, where he insinuates that not just the Secret Society of Supervillain and Infinite Crisis stuff was this Luthor body they discovered. It was also everything that happened during his presidency. So this is my opportunity to talk about President Lex.
Please tell me everything about President
How
Lex.
aware are you of the President Lex story?
I knew that he became president, and I was like, that's fucking brilliant.
Yeah.
I haven't read any of the stories where he was president, though.
So back in the 20th century, there used to be a saying among comic book fans that Marvel had the real cities and DC had the real presidents. And that's where their similarities to reality stopped. But DC decided to change that with a political shakeup in 2000. This is in the wake of the No Man's Land event. Did you read No Man's Land?
I did read No Man's Land, which I love.
Incredible.
It's really great.
Great story. But it's basically about the US government absolutely failing to protect Gotham City to the point that they have to declare it not part of the US anymore. And it's just such an embarrassment and such a disaster that in the aftermath of it, Lex Luthor is able to run a successful presidential campaign, embarrassing the current administration and defeating George W. Bush in the general election to become the new president of the United States. And he does a good job. Like, Superman and Batman and everybody are suspicious, but the thing about Lex Luthor is that he actually makes good on his threats that, like, if Superman wasn't around, I'd be able to do so much good for humanity. He gives money to education. He supports the superheroes. He creates this incredible presidential cabinet that includes Black Lightning in it.
He's like the anti-Trump, basically, is what you're telling me.
In fact, he gives away LexCorp to be run by Talia al Ghul while he's president, because it would be a conflict of interest for him to hold on to LexCorp while he was president.
Lex, low-key the best United States president of all time.
The only other person to do that was Jimmy Carter.
I know. I was thinking about Jimmy Carter's peanut farm.
Yeah. So he's actually a good president, and it's really pissing Superman off because he's waiting for the other shoe to drop. There's nothing he can do about it. Lois Lane is like, he's up to something. I know he's up to something. Mm-hmm. And it's only around the end of what would be his first term in 2003, 2004, that Lex Luthor starts going crazy because he's been abusing Venom, because he's a very vain man and he uses it to stay in shape. And it starts kind of warping his brain. And he uses it to try to bring a kryptonite meteor towards Earth and tries to blame the fact that it's homing on Superman, and him being here is the reason kryptonite keeps landing here and he needs to go away.
This is just Elon Musk getting addicted to ketamine.
Yes. And he frames Batman for murder, and they both get out of it, and they expose Luthor for his crimes as he's doing an insane rant in a fight in his war suit with them in the climax. And he gets impeached, and we don't see him as president again.
That's so good.
That is the Lex Luthor. Oh, also during his presidency, he legitimately defended the world from at the Imperiex War. There was this big Galactus-like alien who came up, and Luthor was able to corral the world's forces to actually save the world. He did it by making a deal with Darkseid, but he still did it.
James Gunn, you're definitely not listening to this, but if you are, you should do President Lex. I think it would be so good.
So many other people have done President Lex since then. Technically, the first person to do President Lex, I think, was Mark Millar in Red Son a few years before this.
Oh, yeah.
And that might have been where the President Lex story's inspiration came from.
Yeah. Superman, the Red Son is very influential, and I always heard about it from other non-comic book fans as being oh, such a good Superman story. But here's what I actually want to submit to for your approval. It's not very good.
Yeah. It's a Mark Millar book.
It doesn't really understand the differences between Soviet Russia and America. It just comes up with a good idea and then estimates,
right. Yeah, there are some great ideas in Red Son, I wonder if the movie is better. Have you ever seen the animated adaptation?
I haven't seen the animated adaptation because of my my resistance to the idea. But the thing about Mark Millar is that he often comes up with really great ideas that are adapted much better than the comic book version he wrote.
Yes.
Yes.
And that's what I think might be the case here.
Well, I'll have to check it out.
Yeah.
The DC animated movie stuff has always been really, really good.
Except around like 2013 to like 2020.
What happens there? I was completely
that's when they decided to put all their animated movies in the same New 52 inspired continuity, and they kind of churned out 3 a year, and it all kind of looks really bleak. And I know it has its fans, but
yeah, I can see why replicating the exact same problems from the comic book continuity into a new medium would not exactly have incredible returns for them.
They've been better recently, but they're about to shut down the whole line so they can restart the animated movies to like take place in the James Gunn continuity.
Don't do it again. Come on. Like, the thing that makes them so good is that they're just wildly different takes on the characters.
Right.
You know,
the thing James Gunn wants to do is he wants to make DC a little bit more like Star Wars is now, where just like every version of media is on the same page. So he was promised not to affect the comics that way. The comics won't have to really worry about what he's doing, but he wants the TV shows and the animated movies to all kind of be in that same bigger story. And they'll all use the same actors. So will the video games. And that's the idea. We'll see how it does because there hasn't been a successful DC movie in a while.
Yeah. You know, you saw Blue Beetle, and everyone that's seen it has said it's super fun, but also it got completely trounced in terms of box office numbers.
Yeah.
Which is, I mean,
it's sad.
It's a little sad, but it also shows you where audiences' brains are at right now.
Where the faith is in the DC brand and superheroes as a concept.
Yeah. I think post MCU.
Post Endgame.
Audiences have really were like, that was a 10-year experiment that we really all enjoyed.
The end.
Yes, very much so. I mean, that's how I felt as a viewer, right? It was like, I watched all of these things for 10 years, and now I'm old.
Right.
Like, I can't do it again.
Okay. Well, with your permission, I'd like to go on to asking the questions.
Permission granted. Go right ahead.
This is where we take some of the questions that are submitted to us at 52mailbag@gmail.com. Write yours in today. Our first question comes from Alex F., who asks, what made Trinity falter with audiences while 52 succeeded?
Well, this is a question I think for you more reasonably, but as I shouldn't read Trinity.
Yeah.
I was part of the problem.
Well, there's a reason nobody read Trinity, and that's because there was a whole ass series in between 52 and Trinity called Countdown, where people tuned in and then it lost the faith. Much like Blue Beetle coming after The Flash into Black Adam. It is good. Trinity is good. I will stand up for Trinity. But after the miserable experience that was Countdown just not working the same way 52 did, people weren't willing to give that a shot.
Yeah, Countdown was really bad.
Yeah.
Countdown was like astronomically terrible.
Yeah.
I think the only way for you to discover how bad Countdown is to literally just read one issue. Actually, no, there's one better way, which is at Comic-Con before Countdown started, they handed out all these buttons that were like the mystery box aspects of Countdown that they wanted to promote. Like Jimmy Olsen Must Die, I remember being one. Guess what is never explained throughout Countdown? Why Jimmy Olsen must die. You know, like
there was also like this button that was like a creepy hand on Mary Marvel's shoulder with the tagline "Seduction of the Innocent." Like it's like, oh, we're getting into the Frederick Worthamy stuff.
Yeah,
you're just being a creep.
Yeah, it's just weird. You just gave people a sexual assault button. Why did you do that? Like, for what it's worth, even though 52 did not complete the brief, right? They didn't actually tell the secret story of what happened during that year where the superheroes were not available. It did answer all of the mysteries that it sets up.
They understood the assignment, but they disregarded.
Yes. Yes. They set up their own mysteries to solve, and they solved those mysteries. They did not solve the mysteries that were handed to them.
Yeah. I don't want to solve Dan DiDio's shitty mystery about why Cassandra Cain is a supervillain now.
Yeah, like, because what you do when you solve Dan's stupid mysteries, you end up with fucking Countdown.
Do you want ants? That's how you get ants.
Yeah, my God. Like, literally, yes. So, Trinity, I gather, is a 52-like, but it directly involves the three big guys.
Yes. Instead of being about everybody else, it's about how important Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman are, which is an interesting concept because the idea of the Trinity itself, the idea of these core three heroes, is relatively new. It's not a thing that was ever emphasized at any point in the 20th century. It comes up once, like 3-issue Wonder Woman arc in the 90s. The idea that there are these three pillars, but of course Wonder Woman's going to be positioned as the third pillar in a Wonder Woman comic.
Yeah.
Outside of that, there's never really an acknowledgement that there are these like three heroes. And it's really only in Infinite Crisis and 52 that their absence defines how important they are. And they begin being perceived as the Trinity from that point on. Whereas before it was always kind of Batman and Superman, or in the Golden Age, Superman, Batman, and Robin. Robin was really, really important to that dynamic in the 40s and 50s. And a lot of people forget that. Anyway, so what 2008's Trinity series was trying to do was set up the idea that totemically and psychically and iconically, Wonder Woman is as important as Batman and Superman. It's these three guys. It's always been these three guys. It's a point we didn't need to be made that strongly. 52 kind of already did it for us through negative space.
Via their absence. Yeah, exactly.
But Kurt Busiek does a good job with the assignment he's given. He does some interesting stuff in there. He explores some ideas about like comic book character mythology and what we think about them. And I think it's an interesting read, but it's not 52. 52 is a miracle.
Yeah. It's sort of like the first season of Heroes and then the second season of Heroes.
Yeah.
Where like they could do it once, they couldn't do it a second time. The juice was not there.
The juice was not loose. Our next question. I think this is one I'm going to field to you because it feels like a question more about media and storytelling in general than it does about DC Comics specifically. Odon D asks, why do all my favorite characters have to die?
Okay, I wondered this also because that's the fate of most of my favorite characters too. And they are usually my favorites before they die. So I feel like in the construction of a story, often the characters that make the most impact have to be secondary because of the stories that the writers are trying to tell. And the superhero stories are often driven by the idea of heroism, of someone responding to a call of being a hero. We've all lived through subpar superhero origin movies or first issues, right? Where the getting the power and responding to the call ends up being the least interesting thing about them because we've seen that kind of part of the hero's journey so many times before. What is interesting is someone who shows up and is a spoiler, right? I'm thinking specifically, I reviewed Final Fantasy 16 for Polygon a few months ago, and I really liked Sid because he showed up and while Clive is angsting, Sid is having a freaking good time. Sid is just chilling and being a homie. And it's really fun to be around him. And then Sid dies. It's really upsetting.
The show can't be about Kramer. It has to be about Jerry.
Yeah. I think it's the Kramer principle, right? Where if you actually spent 22 minutes with Kramer, you would actually find him to be a less interesting character.
You can't build the whole plane out of the black box.
Yeah. God. It's just this one of these things where some types of characters are better in small doses, but they're always my favorite.
Yeah. In the case of Vic Sage and Renee Montoya, the reason that works is that they're a duo that work off each other. And that's something that I think would work as its own story. But Vic Sage, I'm just going to say it. Vic Sage really does have to die for Renee Montoya's story to continue. That was the only way to do it. He could come back because superheroes always come back, but he did have to die.
And it's a conclusion of his particular heroic journey, right?
Yeah.
he needs that arc to end definitively before he comes back in other forms, you
Right,
know?
of course. And give it 10 years, which they did.
Yeah, it's pretty perfect. But like, in order for that story of his emotional journey and his journey from jerk to not jerk to feel complete, he has to pass it on and then pass away. And it has to work that way. As, like, mentor figures are also really designed to be temporary. I'm thinking like Obi-Wan Kenobi in the first Star Wars movie, right? Like, he's gotta go.
I recently read through The Secret History of Star Wars, and there's this whole account of George Lucas trying to figure out the second act of Star Wars, and his wife is just like, you gotta kill Obi-Wan. That's the only way to move this forward.
It's correct.
I want to kill Obi-Wan. He's my favorite guy.
It's the same tension. He's your favorite guy. You don't want him to die. But in order for the main character to fill in that space and also to start making decisions on their own without their mentor to show that they've learned the lessons that their mentor needed to teach them, the mentor has to go away in some way.
The old world is dying while the new one struggles to be born.
Yep.
And on that note, I think it's time to bid farewell to this, what I thought would be a short episode.
No, it's never going to be short with us.
We always have too much to talk about. That's what happens when you get two psychos in a room together. I do have one last question for you,
Okay,
Gita.
let me know. What is it?
Are you ready?
I don't know. Are you ready?
52 Pickup is an Aftermath production created by Gita Jackson and Alex Jaffe and edited by Esper Quinn with original music by John Ahrens. To follow along with us, find 52 at your local library, bookstore, comic store, or digitally on the DC Universe Infinite subscription service, or for free with a library card on Hoopla. The views and opinions expressed on this show are solely those of the show's personalities and do not reflect those of DC Entertainment or Warner Brothers. Please rate and review our show wherever you can, and send your questions and comments to 52mailbag@gmail.com. Never stop reading comics.
Yeah, this is scary.
Yeah, it's
It freaks.
so unpleasant.
Oh my god. I'm a hot weather person, but I can't stand the humidity.
Well, I'm from Florida and I escaped Florida for a reason.
Yeah. All right. Let me get my notes and everything open. Last time I didn't record with the issue open in front of me, and that was a mistake. So let
Yeah,
me get the issue open too.
definitely do that.
Yeah, because it's just easier to refer to it. We're not talking about a hugely long piece of written word, so
Yeah,
it's easier just. And I wanted to mention something. So I have the new digital editions of these are the new collected editions, and
yeah,
I'm slightly afraid that they may have made some small edits to it that makes our edition slightly different.
that's
'Cause
possible.
last week when you were talking, some of the things that you said happened in like week 2 or a day 2 or day 3, and wrote in my notes happened on different uh days of the week. So that's either because I was sick with COVID while I was writing my notes, or because they're just ever so slightly different.
I
So
think what happened there is that you went ahead on a day, you went ahead past a point that I wanted to talk about, and I kind of took us back because
okay.
I just wanted to hit a thing that we
We
skipped
need
over before going too far.
yes. That's totally fine. Okay. I just want to know where the inaccuracy occurred, whether
Yeah,
it's with me or it's with okay, but that was just part of the recording process, so
yeah.
that's fine. So let me open my show notes.
I got complimented for my Batman shirt today at Panera Bread. We talked
Oh
about Blue
yeah.
Beetle.
Oh great. Oh,
Yeah.
that's wonderful.
Are you over COVID yet?
I am over it.
Uh,
So
so let's
when
see
do we
that
want to see
movie.
it? Yeah. So we're both out of town at the same time, so that doesn't even matter, but like literally exactly the same time. Um, my birthday's on the 13th,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm trying to think if there's any other consideration for seeing a movie, but I don't think so. I have a draft due on Friday, so I'm probably going to be hunkered down working for the rest of the week. But weekend time, if you want to see a matinee, I'm happy to see one.
Yeah, weekend matinee. I would be totally down for that.
Hell yeah, let's make that plan.
We'll make that plan, absolutely. This time, you take care of the tickets.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I got it last time.
Yes.
Um,
Dooley. I just need to go to this channel. There we go. And I need to get rid of Craig or just don't show his video. I don't need to look at that. And oh my god.
you can do that?
Yeah, if you right click, there is something checked that says show non-video participants.
There we
Uncheck
go.
it. Yeah, there you go.
Terrific. That changes my whole deal.
Yeah, it makes it a lot easier to look at.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Hello
Yeah.
there.
Hello. And then I can just full screen this, and I don't have to worry about it. I have all my
Yeah.
tabs open. We're all good to go. This is
All
a good
right.
issue. I'm excited to talk about this.
Yeah, this is a good issue.
I
And
definitely think this is where they hit their stride in terms of how the flow of each issue will happen.
let's do the intro.
Okay.
Let's do the intro.
Okay, let me open up Audacity.
It's your turn to do the intro.
All right. Let me.
You do the odd numbered issues. Remember that.
That's smart. Okay.
And that's our show.
Great. Another one for the books. I'm just going to go
Boom,
ahead and
boom,
give
boom.
Esper my file anyway.
Yeah, yes, do that. I'm going to try to see if any of this saved.
All right. Good luck.
Yeah, 52p3. Are we doing another one tomorrow?
Yes, that was what I was under the impression of, unless anything changes, but I have a recording session scheduled in for 3 p.m. tomorrow.
3 p.m. tomorrow. Yeah, that should work.
All right.
All right, let me did I get anything? No, I got nothing. Absolutely not. Great.
I wasn't anticipating this happening, but I liked the Freakazoid conversation a lot. Because
Yeah.
I like the way that I came in with something that might be apocryphal, and then we explain the real history, and I feel like listeners really like learning something alongside the hosts.
Are you ready for me to blow your mind right now, Gita?
Yeah.
I literally learned this thing about Freakazoid and the Creeper yesterday.
Oh my god, that's so funny. Were you also looking it up?
Yeah, somebody asked me for my DC column about the Creeper's origins and like whether he's like a guy who breaks the fourth wall. And I'm like, historically, not really. There's this conception from the animated series of him being this like sort of Freakazoid-y figure. And I'm like, actually, is there a connection between Freakazoid and the Creeper? And then I found out on the DVD commentary of Freakazoid, Bruce Timm talks all about it. And I was able to unravel the rest from there.
That's so interesting. I'm so glad. That's why I'm also glad that I'm trying to give you my notes early in case there's anything you can look up. But I will not regret not looking that up prior because I think it would have stopped me from talking about it.
No, that was a perfect moment, and I think people are going to love it.
I think so too.
This is a good show. It's a good fucking show.
We
do retell a lot of stories, but that's every pod.
That is every pod. And I think retelling the same stories helps reinforce how important they are to the thing that we're discussing.
Yeah.
Another thing I realized, I'm just waiting for my thing to upload. I think after this, we definitely have to go back to the original Crisis on Infinite Earths. I would love to.
You don't know what you ask, Gita. You don't know what you ask.
You don't
know what you ask.
Interesting.
Every page of Crisis on Infinite Earth is so dense. Every page is a podcast. It's too much. It's too much.
We need to have some kind of. There has to be some kind of discussion of how this like
know
literally
what you ask,
changed
traveler.
the game.
My potions are too strong for the likes of you. You better go to a potion seller who sells weaker potions.
I love that bit so much.
Potion seller, I implore you. I am going into battle.
But, I mean, you're right in that it is kind of too much. And it's like, I'm glad we didn't just literally do my original idea, which was just do everything in publication order because it's actually is too much. But
you want to do all of DC in publication order?
I wanted to do just the Crisis crossovers in publication order. That was the idea.
That would suck.
Yeah, because there's a lot of whiffs. I think it's better to go to the
you don't want to spend a month talking about 0 Hour and Power Girl's phantom pregnancy with Hal Jordan.
That was so fun.
You don't want to talk about Armageddon 2001, where Extant turns out to be the Hawk because everyone guessed that it was Captain Atom, so they changed it at the last minute.
That is really funny, though.
Yeah. Actually, I do kind of want to.
See, we could maybe shorten them when they become important and do them as extra episodes, right? But I felt like 52 is the good shit. And I just want to talk about 52.
Yeah, I want to get right. I love starting with 52 because 52 is why I love comics.
Yes, and it's why I went back to all of the things that they were referencing here. So I just posted my link, and I'll see you tomorrow. I'll get you the notes, if not tonight, then tomorrow morning.
Yeah, we'll do that. All right.
Word.
I'll talk to you at 3 tomorrow.
Talk to you 3 tomorrow. Peace.
Bye.